Today on Locked On Canadiens, Wright versus Slafkovsky yet again, and will the Habs win the Cup in the next 5 years?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 1070 of Locked On Canadiens. We are your daily podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team free and available wherever you get your podcasts every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Laura Saab, also known as the Active Stick, and I am joined by Scott Matla of Habs Eyes on the Prize, and we have a lot of meaty topics to get into today, Scott. Sorry for doing that. I know you're hungry. How are you otherwise?
I'm doing all right. It's been a busy, like I said, it's been a busy week back at work. But even with that, we are inching closer and closer and closer to the date that literally everybody cares about based on our analytics of our episodes. The NHL Draft is a month and a half away at this point, and everybody is anxious, and we will have mock draft stuff later on in this episode. I'm excited because I love this, but I know that that is on my calendar. Like, that is what I am like beeline for. It's like I have a concert next week that I'm going to, and I have this, and I have this wedding to go to, and this wedding to go to, and this event. But I'm like, nope, draft. NHL Draft is right here because it's the same week that I go to a wrestling show. One of my favorite pay-per-views of the year is that weekend, and then it's also the NHL Draft. I am going to be so unproductive at my day job. If any of my coworkers or bosses are listening to this, I never said that. I promise I never said that.
Well, I know some of my coworkers listen to this, but I have the excuse. I'm going to be away. I'm going on vacation before the NHL Draft, so I will be unproductive at that point. But all right, speaking of the draft, real quick, we have a prospect mailbag episode. This Friday's mailbag, it is prospects. So please send us your prospect questions if you haven't already. And if you sent me one in January, I've saved it, so don't worry. Send us your mailbag questions about prospects to lockedoncanadiens at gmail.com, not email.com, at gmail.com. You can also send them to us on Twitter, LO_Canadiens. You can leave them in the YouTube comments. Just put MBQ at the beginning or mailbag question, whatever it is, so that we know that you want us to bring it up with our special prospect guest on the Friday mailbag. All right, let's get into the end of the topic that we were discussing for the past two shows. In the first episode, we did year 1 and year 2 of the Montreal Canadiens as of now, right? So we're thinking like the upturn. We're expecting the upturn. And then yesterday we did year 3 and year 4, and now we're doing year 5. And so Scott and I had decided that it wouldn't be the end of the world if by year 4 the Canadiens weren't winning the Cup, but we at least wanted them to be a team that nobody wanted to play. But then we're talking about 5 years from now, right? And as Scott pointed out when we first started this exercise 2 episodes ago, there are only 2 Montreal Canadiens that have been signed or that will be under contract at that point, and they are Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. So in theory, this entire team could be different, but still built around those 2. So What do we think it's going to be like 5 years from now?
It's like we talked in the last episode. Will they be cup contenders? Will they win a cup? It is so hard to know, in that they could build this team perfectly top to bottom. All the stats say this, all the vibes say this, and then they just lose in the first round anyways, because sometimes that's how hockey goes. It's in 5 years it's such a long look into the future that I look at this team and I go, okay, you're assuming Suzuki and Caulfield are still here. You are assuming Slafkovsky is still here. You are assuming that guys like David Reinbacher and Lane Hudson are still here. It's the rest of the team that gets hazy. Will Kirby Dach be here? We want to assume so. Alex Newhook potentially as well.
If they draft a really good center in this upcoming draft, will there be room for Kirby Dach, right?
Yeah, it's like, does Dach move to the wing at that point? Because maybe Owen Beck comes in and he's just a really good face-off defensive two-way center there, like in the mold of Philip Deneau, which is not a direct comparison before anyone comes for my head on that. It's it's a deep look, and I think the biggest thing here is in net is that they are hoping that Jacob Fowler is the guy at that point. And I don't see any reason to bet against that you have a guy who wants to compete and be there in net. In 5 years, it really does feel like this should be a team that is talked about like Carolina is right now. Look at all this talent they have drafted and developed, some through some trades coming in there and stuff too, smart free agent signings and smart contract management. And this is that team. Guys we have drafted and developed in-house and turned into this deep team. 4 lines of just, we're going to kick your ass if we have to, with a really smart defensive group and then a solid goaltender behind there. Maybe that part isn't true for Carolina, but you're hoping that's the model you're following. Or even Tampa with some of the moves they made. When they won their cups, a lot of those guys on their team were drafted and developed with some trade pieces here and there. If they're going and following that, or even what the Rangers are doing right now, where the Rangers are a top team, that is the model you hope they're following there. And that within 5 years, you're thinking, can they be President's Trophy contenders? Can they be that team that when you see them on the schedule, you're like, I don't want to play this team. I do not want to see them in our building because it sucks. It is painful to play against them. Tampa at their peak, Pittsburgh at their peak, Ovechkin when he was scoring a bajillion goals every year. Even Toronto now sometimes. I want them to be that team that you see them on the schedule and you go, I'm scheduling a loss here, regardless of anything else. I want the Canadiens to be that team that are talked about as in, wow, look at all this talent. Look at how well coached they are. Look at the good goaltending they're getting. I want to see all those charts that everything is in blue and there's not red or in green or whatever the positive color you're using is on this. I want to see this Canadiens team be one of those ones that when Micah tweets out his charts, he goes, you don't stop this Montreal offense, or you don't score against this Montreal goaltender. That is the future I want to see in 5 years for this team.
And I think, when we're talking about this, right? And it's easy to be like, okay, only 2 players are signed and theoretically they could all change. But that's not how this plan works, right? Like Kent Hughes is developing these people to either sign them for a contending period or to trade them to get assets for a contending period, right? So like from my perspective, essentially what I'm expecting is that at the end of this 5-year plan, if years 1, 2, 3, and 4 went according to plan and the development works, they make the right decisions at that point, 5 years from now, we're talking about every single time the end of the postseason rolls around, Montreal Canadiens fans have a lot to be excited about, have a lot to anticipate, and they're a team that nobody wants to face, right? Because multiple times Kent Hughes has said it's about the long-term future. He's not here just to bring like a flash in the pan kind of success. He wants this team to be a perennial contender. He was hired to do that. That was the mandate he had. Jeff Gorton was hired with that mandate. You gotta right the ship and make the Montreal Canadiens great. You have to bring them back to their historic greatness. And so in a world like today, the Canadiens, like the cap is the cap, but the Canadiens have advantages elsewhere. They are a team with deep pockets. They can afford to spend on nutritionists, coaches, sports psychologists, development people, like how many development coaches they've got, or development consultants, they've got. Literally like one of the best players in Canadian history, multiple gold medal winner, top star Marie-Philippe Poulin is working with the Montreal Canadiens as a development consultant, right? Like this is the kind of people they hire. So they have that advantage. So if everything does go to plan and all of these people that they've spoken to and that they work with and that they have the ability to consult and hire, all of that stuff should add up to a team, like you said. Now, it's not like Carolina didn't make missteps, right? Like they've made a ton of mistakes and we've seen a couple of them. We've been the beneficiary of a couple of them. But at the end of the day, like, even with all of those mistakes, you should be a team that nobody wants to face. And you should be a team also that players want to play for. It's like underestimated just how much winning counts. People always talk about, in Montreal, the taxes are too high. There's too much scrutiny. Oh, you know what? The families don't like it there, all of that. But at the end of the day, if you have a shot at winning every year for a few years, people are going to want to sign with that team. They're going to be like, no, I'm going to leave this hometown team or whatever. I'm not taking a hometown discount. I'm going to go to Montreal because there's a possibility of winning in Montreal. And that is all we are asking for. We know how hard it is to win a cup. We know how much luck plays into it, injuries, all kinds of things could go wrong. PDO could tank, all of that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, if this GM, and I'm going to include Jeff Gordon and all the front office people, if they do things the right way, that's a team that everybody wants to play for and everybody thinks can win. And even with Colorado, like they had so many second round exits, or it was a part of their identity for a while. They ended up winning the Stanley Cup because every year people are like, I don't want to face that team. Like they're too good. They're too good. That's what you want. And it looks like the Canadiens are following that model. But enough of my rambling and ranting. We have another thing to get into, and this was a mailbag topic that it was suggested as a extended topic, and Scott and I are really excited to revisit the months-long debate we had 2 years ago when it comes to Shane Wright versus Juraj Slafkovsky, and that is happening in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Now, we are deep in the NHL playoffs. We are in the NBA playoffs. It is winner take all time in both the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. You heard me right, $150 in bonus bets. And you can use that, like I said, like the playoffs are, I think, the most fun time to be making the bet because anything could go wrong, but they've got all the odds. And you can get $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. You can visit fanduel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. That is fanduel.com/LOCKEDON. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, let us get into I was just thinking about this topic and I was like, do you remember the endless debates, the endless soul searching and navel gazing and all of that stuff we used to talk about Shane Wright versus Juraj Slafkovsky, and I am here to tell you that I was 100% wrong.
It's a very funny thing because through the first half of this NHL season, the debate still continued because Shane Wright was lighting up the AHL, and we were debating if they should send Juraj Slafkovsky down or not. And it was such a bizarre thing that all of a sudden it just clicked. And we're 2 years on from him allegedly staring down the Canadiens table at the NHL Draft in Montreal and everything.
When Marty was eating chips.
Yes. And it's just like, it's been such a wild path because Shane Wright has done a lot of, really strong and good things for the Seattle Kraken there. He just had such a bizarre first year in the NHL where they were purposely just like not playing him. He played 8 games in the NHL and felt like he was there for 6 months. Was sent on a conditioning stint to the AHL where he put up 6 points in 8 games, and then went back to the OHL after his rights were traded to Windsor, where he put up 37 points in 20 games, put up 7 points at World Juniors and everything. And then this year in the NHL, 8 games, 5 points. Still hasn't fully become a full-time NHLer in Seattle. And I don't know how much of that is Dave Haxtell or other things. Now Dave Haxtell is gone from the Seattle Kraken, and he had a very strong AHL season. I can't deny that. 47 points in 59 games for what is technically, I guess, a rookie player. This would be his rookie season in the AHL, is a pretty impressive showing. Coachella was a very good team, but I look at this and I go, he dominated the AHL. 47 points. That's all well and good. Juraj Slafkovsky this year put up 50 points in the NHL, playing harder minutes on a less good team after basically not doing anything for the first half of the year. And that's kind of where I look at this and I go, yeah, That's pretty nuts. From 39 games, 10 points last year to 50 points in 82 games this year. And now another point at the World Championships today, but that's not the point. 2 years on, it feels a lot like the Canadiens made the right choice, especially if this is just the starting point for what Slafkovsky's ascension can be. If he is playing like he did the back half of the season for a full season, are we talking, 65, 70 point guy, which that sounds phenomenal because he does so many little things well. I want to see Shane Wright full-time in the NHL before I'm willing to declare, yes, this was definitely the right choice. I can still go either way on who the Canadiens have picked because I would trust Kent Hughes' judgment, especially now that I've seen this. But boy, it looks like the Canadiens really made the right pick. And I admittedly was wrong. I wasn't, I was full Shane Wright or Logan Cooley here thinking the Canadiens needed a center. I'm happy to be wrong about this pick so far because I've grown to just adore Juraj Slafkovsky, the player. And 2 years on, even beyond that, he looks like a really just truly special talent at this point.
Right. And I did forget to credit the listener who came up with this idea. So Charles W, once again, thank you for this. And that was the thing, because the question wasn't, who made the right decision. It was just me that said that I was 100% wrong. The question was really, let's revisit this 2 years later. And also, some question marks about the decision making that's going on in Seattle, right? So maybe the Montreal Canadiens, we were like, why did they put him in the NHL if they weren't going to play him as many minutes as we want him to play? Why didn't they just send him down to the AHL so that he could be the guy in the AHL? And we asked ourselves this question. We asked this question on this podcast so many times. We were talking about, like, what is this decision that's being made? But then we see a situation in which another team did just what we were asking for our team and our player. And, you're looking at it now and it's like, yes, I'm sure that Slafkovsky would have lit it up in the AHL. He would not have been going to the OHL, but he would have lit it up in Laval. And his development, we felt, would have been maybe a little bit more linear. But I think the Canadiens, in having that patience, I think, when I look back on it, I wonder if it's just the fact that the front office just wanted him to be around Marty longer, right? I wonder if that was it, is that, they know that he's not going to be playing on that first line like we want him to. We know they're not going to put him with, and we weren't even asking for the first line. We were just kind of like anyone, put him in a better spot, right?
Not with Josh Anderson, basically, was our ask.
Yes, essentially. That was it. And so we kept asking for that. And then I know, it wasn't like, I would exaggerate and I would say, he only played 4 minutes a game. And then, there would be 10 listeners being like, Laura, here's his ice time. It was not 10 minutes. It was not 4 minutes a game. It was more like 11. But either way, what I'm saying is that 2 years on, they took one track with their player and the Habs took a different track with the other player. And it took some time, but the fact that he had his breakout year, I'm confident that he's going to continue to, I'm confident that this wasn't a flash in the pan. And also, the other day you praised him and somebody was like, he only has 1 point. I'm like, that's not the point. The point is all the things he is doing on the ice. You weren't just and off the ice too. But you weren't just talking about oh my God, he showed up and he scored 1 million points. That's not what's going on, but he is effective. And I think that to me is the biggest thing. Is Juraj Slafkovsky, I have grown to really, really enjoy just everything. The fact that he's on our team, his quote unquote antics, his expressions, the way he taunts other teams, the way he, the way he kind of talks smack, but then he has self-deprecating jokes as well. So I really, really do enjoy him. And then you look at what he's doing on the ice, particularly in that situation. And you also listen to what a player like Nick Suzuki says, right? He says, this guy is going to be one of the top wingers in the game. He has that. He plays with him every night. He plays with him. He practices with him. And he says that, right? And this is a guy, Nick Suzuki, is not a guy with no experience. He's been in the NHL facing tough competition. And that's so key. Nick Suzuki always gets thrown out against the worst situations. And for him to say, this guy that's playing with me is going to be one of the top wingers in the game in the next few years, that to me is it's just so amazing. So sorry, Charles, I hijacked it. I made it a why we love Slafkovsky segment. You know, even though we've had like 2 of those this week already, I think for me, like I find that 2 years on, it feels like maybe we weren't necessarily, like Scott said, I need to see Shane Wright have meaningful time in the NHL at the same time, like have that opportunity before we can actually call it as to, who made the right decision. But in terms of like, you take the player and you see what they did, like the Habs, it's not like their choice is, at the time, it was a little bit surprising. It was quite surprising, actually. And then we slowly kind of grew to understand it. Now it's like, well, actually, we agree with it at this point. Like we can feel confident that that was the right decision for the Canadiens.
Yeah, it's 2 years on, like and things can swing very quickly on this, and that's the thing is, let's see what Shane Wright can do at the NHL level. This year showed positive step forward, but can he do that full time? That's going to be the real question. What's actually going to settle this debate here, if it ever gets settled? And because fans are fans, probably not. So I think that Slafkovsky has the edge right now, just because he's been a certified NHL player right now. I'm very curious to see where it goes next year, because I assume Shane Wright will be on this team full time.
Right. And when we say this team, we mean Seattle, not this team, the
Yes.
Habs. All right, coming up next, I'm just going to say mock drafts. But first, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. How often have you tried to find tickets to something you want to go to and you find it so hard? Like the playoffs are going on right now, and it would be so cool to just get to be there in person and see it. And with killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. Browse through the Game Time app and you can see anything. You can, have specific games that you're looking for, or you can just look through and see what's there that's available on a deal and just make your decision then. Like, I've got a free night, I want a really good deal on tickets, I'm going to do that. And honestly, for me, like, Game Time has just made everything so easy. They've taken all the stress out of it. They have flash deals, they have zone deals, like I talked about, all in pricing. You know what that means? That means you're not getting hidden fees. And then you get your, you get your view from your seat. They've got the lowest price guarantee. Everything is just so pain-free, so simple. And what you can do is you can take the guesswork out of buying any tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so Scott, mock drafts is kind of your baby. That's the kind of thing you were into. But yesterday you asked if we could use a segment today to do a mock draft roundup, right?
Yes, and part of this comes from as I was out visiting accounts and everything else. Corey Pronman has dropped his first NHL mock draft. Scott Wheeler did one, and I believe it was McKean's who also did theirs. And I want to just kind of go off of those three, because if I am remembering this correctly, and there's a very good chance I very easily could have, just messed up where this was in the back of my head here about who published what. But starting with Corey Pronman, which is usually the one that is closest to what the Montreal Canadiens are doing, and this was posted in The Athletic, the Canadiens kind of get a little bit of help here from the teams in front of them. Obviously, the Sharks pick Macklin Celebrini, the Blackhawks picking Artyom Levshunov from Michigan State, the Ducks taking Anton Silyev from the KHL, and then Columbus picking defenseman Sam Dickinson from London in the OHL, leaving at 5th overall Ivan Demidov for the Montreal Canadiens, the left winger out of the KHL. Everyone's general kind of wish list, one of their wish list forwards, and one of mine too. I think he is the least likely out of all of them, just because I think he might go at 2 or 3 just because of his talent level. But that is a suddenly much more reassuring. And then also because Pronman does the entire first round. With the Canadiens pick that they got from the Jets, they picked Sacha Boisvert out of the USHL. Not
Any
someone that
relation to our friend Ian Boisvert?
I don't think so, but I'm curious if he's related to one of the people who worked for the Montreal Canadiens at one point. Nope. His cousin is Thomas Boisvert, who is not a person that I am even remotely familiar with. Anyways, besides the point.
I took us off on a tangent. But real quick before you say anything, I think for me, the biggest thing, and we'll talk about it with our prospect guest tomorrow, is that, I said, like, what are the chances? And they laughed and they said 1 in 25, like, a 25% chance, a 1 in 4 chance. So, like, it's still up in the air, but I think that the teams ahead of them aren't that stupid.
It all depends on what Chicago does, because I have Scott Wheeler's pulled up in that obviously Celebrini going first overall. It's done. It's over with. We know that's the thing. In this one, Demidov goes second overall to Chicago. Levshunov goes to the Ducks at 3. Anton Silyev goes to the Blue Jackets at 4. And then at 5th overall, Caden Lindstrom goes to the Montreal Canadiens. And that is, I think, my realistic ask for 5th overall. If he is there, he is the player that I want for this team. And again, that is based on defense going early in this draft here. Those top 2 names, Levshunov and Silyev, going early on. And for all we know, Columbus might take Lindstrom. They might go off the board. We don't know who their GM is going to be at this draft currently, or what their scouting department's going to do. Trevor Timmons being, as a part of that, like we talked about in yesterday's episode, he loves his, prospects with intangibles and all these other things here. They could take one of those big defensemen. They might have a little bit of project work to them, but their ceiling is way, way up. And then this goes back to, I think, the draft that I talked about on Monday's episode, but Arpon Basu and Marc-Antoine Gaudin talking about that people need to wrap their head around Beckett Seneke going at 5th overall. And I believe it was McKeens who mocked him to the Canadiens at that point. And I just kind of look at this and I go,
Don't gouge brain it.
It's a hard sell for me.
Yeah.
In that, if you're going to pick him, I would rather trade down and use that to get rid of assets. Whereas if Demidov is available, sick, take it. If Lindstrom is available, take it. If Iginla is there, take it. I'm iffy on Berkeley Catton. It's the one name that I haven't seen really mentioned in the Canadiens like mock draft area there. But
yeah, I think only Sebastian said that it, like, I think Sebastian had him as an honorable mention at 5th.
And that's the thing is that there's so many potential options for it, is that what do they do? It's so unclear right now because Bob McKenzie hasn't published his final draft rankings yet. We're waiting on the elite prospects guides and their mock drafts. A lot of these experts
hockeyprospect.com.
Yeah, the Black Book is coming out soon too, which is just an incredible resource. And as these start to come out, I'm going to do my mock drafts again because I know everyone loves mock drafts. And once I see some what the experts are doing, and once I learn some more about some of these other people, I want to be able to bring that to everybody. But the overarching theme is right now is that nobody knows what the hell is going on. We know Macklin Celebrini is going first overall. Nobody has a clue.
Demidov.
Yes. Nobody has a clue after that. It could be all defense. It could be all forwards. It could be who knows. It's nobody knows right now because there's so many talented people at the top here that fit with teams with multiple needs. Teams need defense, teams need forwards. The Canadiens, if they draft the defenseman, not happy about it, but best player available, maybe.
Yeah.
There could be all forwards that it goes at number 2 is Lindstrom, and then it goes Demidov. And then, we get to the Canadiens and it's like, well, if Levshunov or Silyev are gone, who do you pick?
Right.
Are you taking a defenseman or are you reaching? Those are some of the bigger ones right now. Obviously, as the scouting services come out with their mock drafts and more of the experts begin to publish theirs, we will try and keep up on all of these going into draft season. Friday's episode, we have a prospect expert coming on, a draft expert. Please, 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 please send us all of your draft questions, please, and thank you for that. If you want to know about a prospect that is on your brain, send it to us at LO_Canadiens or lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. You're not going to want to miss it this episode. I promise you.
And having covered a Stanley Cup run on this podcast, I can tell you that is the most wonderful time of the year. But in the absence of that, draft season is the most wonderful time of the year. And we promise you that we've got great content coming up. This is just the first of our many prospect experts that we're having on in the next few weeks. We've had a couple over the season, but not enough. So we'll definitely be talking to them. And so make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. We are free and available everywhere. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Also, remember that we are on Twitter. You can tweet us at LO_Canadiens. Send us DMs. Questions go that way as well. You can email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. You can also leave questions in the YouTube comments. Just put Mailbag questions or MBQ. Thank you so much for listening. Oh, also, you can find me on social media at The Active Stick, and you find Scott at Scott Matla all over social media. Thank you so much for listening. And we will talk to you tomorrow.